Greetings and welcome to the 2021 Falcone Festival. My name is Chris Combest. I'm a board member for the festival, and it's my distinct pleasure to welcome a very special guest today, Dr. Shawn Okpehbolo. Dr. Okpehbolo was recently awarded the American Academy of Arts and Letters Walter Einrichsen Award in Music and also first place winner of the 2020 American Prize in Composition. Currently, he is professor of music composition and theory at Wheaton College Conservatory of Music in Wheaton, Illinois. Welcome, Dr. Okpehbolo.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so glad to finally, I guess, meet you virtually. We've talked a lot over the past, I don't know, 6 months, maybe a year, and so it's great to finally talk with you.
Well, it's
And
our distinct pleasure to have you here. We do have a variety of subjects that I'd like to talk about today, but given the prominence of the tuba concerto that you wrote in the final round of the artist tuba category in this year's competition, maybe could you discuss about how the tuba concerto came about?
yes, so I for my master's and doctorate, I went to the College Conservatory of Music um, at the University of Cincinnati, and I'm actually a tuba euphonium player. And I'll say this formally, like formally, I don't play anymore. Uh, you may not have known that. And so I do have a love for the tuba and the euphonium. So while I was at CCM, I befriended a lot of the brass players, and Tim Northcutt, who I'm sure many of you know in this world as a professor there, and he commissioned me through the Tangier Sacred Music Fund at CCM to compose a concerto for him to be performed at ITech one year. So that's how that came about.
Yes, it's a terrific piece. I mean, I love just the way you use the tuba in conjunction with the ensemble that I heard. I know the recording is out there. I know it may be a challenge to find right now, but it does exist. Um, what particular qualities of the tuba do you find interesting? I know you have a background. You said you're a euphonium player.
Yeah. A couple things. One, again, I'm probably speaking to the choir here, so you all know about the tuba. But those of you who are just listening in who are not maybe not familiar, as familiar with the tuba, tuba has a pretty big range, and within the ranges, different colors can be produced. I mean, the lower range, frankly, sounds different than than the higher range. Um, it's more agile than one may think, um, and I really appreciate that about the tuba. Again, and also versatile in terms of timbre, in terms of different colors you could produce, and frankly, it's there's not many tuba concertos out there, and so it's good. It's a good medium to explore.
Well, what are some challenges that you found when composing this work? I mean, had you written for the tuba in this kind of setting before?
No, so some of the obvious challenges is tuba um, is technically considered a soft instrument, meaning I know that I'm gonna offend some people, but
Sure, people are shaking their heads right now.
right. Well, Tim will tell you I can blast over anyone, and he can. So probably soft isn't probably the right answer or the right way of describing it, but it can easily be covered up by the band or the orchestra, not because of how loud it is, but because of the register.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
and there are some challenges with that to make sure I orchestrate it enough where the tuba can shine without amplification. And so that's probably the biggest challenge is orchestration in a concerto type setting.
I- Were there any influences? Did you listen to anything prior to this to maybe get some ideas about what to expect? And I mean, if you haven't written for the instrument before, how did you approach that?
Yeah, well, so I do. So the good news, I feel comfortable writing for tuba and brass. I come from the brass band tradition, the English style brass band tradition. So I'm very familiar with the tuba. And again, like I said, I play the tuba. So writing for the tuba wasn't necessarily in terms of challenging in that respect. For example, if I were writing a clarinet concerto or a violin concerto, I would have to do much more research, I think, about the actual mechanics of the instrument, as I do with all my pieces that I write for. I didn't really have to do that as much with the tuba, so I focus on, in terms of inspiration, um, you know, pieces within the lower range, you know. And actually, I did listen to a lot of song, for baritone and bass, to kind of to kind of see how a low sound, even though tubas can get much lower than that, how that can be effective in a large ensemble setting, or solo setting.
I can understand that. I think, one of the unique aspects of much literature, the tuba, is the interplay between the left hand with
Hmm.
the tuba and like when it works and when it doesn't work. So there's a lot more right hand writing
Hmm.
as to complement that. So I can see that being a parallel
Hmm.
composition there. Um, Maybe can you give us an idea about what you're? I'm not really a composer. I'm sure there are a lot of people watching this that do composition. Maybe give us maybe a brief window into your compositional technique. How does this come about?
Well, I'll talk about maybe about my process. I actually start with form. Um, that's important to me. And by the way, people do things differently, but I have to have a really solid structure and outline before I even write one note. Not that I can't veer away from that as I compose, and I often do. It looks quite different, but I have to start with a an overall organization, of the piece. This piece is called Dialogue for Tuba and Band because I wanted to be a conversation, um, with the tuba and the ensemble. Sorry, I have allergies. um, and so that was my focus. How can I write a piece that kind of interplays more than just mere accompaniment to a solo, into a solo instrument.
Yes, I think that came across. I was really curious about I wasn't familiar with your works before I heard this concerto, so I've explored your other recordings of your other pieces, and I really love the variety of sounds that you have and that you employ. Is there a particular, I don't know, set of sounds that you feel drawn to compose more often, or?
Well, as far as sounds, I would say maybe if I'm not answering your question, let me know. But I love counterpoint. I love harmony. And I love rhythm. And so those are three things that I tend to focus on, in writing a piece. Now, on top of that, trying to create as many unique or interesting colors as possible, with the piece with the piece I'm writing. But also, I want the piece to be a musical journey to tell a story. It doesn't necessarily have to be about something specific, but I do want to take you on a journey, you know, and that's my focus when I'm writing.
Yeah, I could see. I mean, even I visited your YouTube channel. Even the pieces that you have there, there's a real kind of back and forth between things that are tied to more current
Hmm.
events that are tied to specific events,
Right.
and then other things that are more tone poems on their own. And I really enjoy that kind of like juxtaposition between those different approaches. I really think it came across really well, and I'm excited about this concerto. I wish we could really hear it with the band live. I was really looking forward to that. I'm sure many people were this year. I know we've discussed our shared Kentucky connection in the past conversations that
Right.
we've had, but can you just kind of maybe take us on a little bit of a journey about how you started in music and
Yeah, I love to. It's a very interesting, perhaps unique story. Um, but I actually grew up poor, in the projects of Lexington, Kentucky. Single mom, whole nine yards. She worked three jobs and um, just to try to put food on the table and pay for rent and things like that. And she's a superwoman. I can go on about my mother, but um, around age 6 or so, the Salvation Army church bus came to the projects where I lived, and they basically every Wednesday picked the kids up for like a Boy Scout, Girl Scout type program through the Salvation Army Church. My mother, very overprotective, she didn't let our kids go on this bus. He came along with us every Wednesday night. Um, and so we started going there for a while, and then we started going to the church, Salvation Army Church. And many of you brass players know that the Salvation Army has a huge, one of the biggest music traditions, not just that, brass music traditions. So at age, 7, I got a baritone horn. My twin sister, got an alto horn. Some of you in overseas will call it a tenor horn, and my younger sister got a cornet. She was, I think, 5 then. And so I had brass instruction at a very young age. Now, through world class musicians. So in my church, in Lexington, James Kerno went there, and he's a prominent band composer, and Ronald Holt, who's a brass band guy. And so I had pretty much world class music instruction through the Salvation Army, free. That was my music education, free lessons at the Salvation Army. And so I always rather create than actual perform. I learned that at a very young age. So around age 13 or 14, Jim Kerno. That's funny. I played it. I wrote a little baritone solo for baritone and piano. I played it at church one day, or for euphonium and piano, and Jim Kerno is a euphonium player too. And after the service, he says, Shawn, you're sounding very great, on the euphonium, but how about I'll start giving you lessons. So I said, sure, Mr. Kerno. And so when he was in town, he's very international. When he was in town, I would get lessons from him. And after the third lesson, I said, Mr. Kerno, I really appreciate the euphonium lessons, but could you teach me composition? And he says, I'd much rather do that anyway. And so he was my teacher from age 13 or 14, and still to this day, I send him everything I write pretty much. And he's a mentor's mentor. I mean, he's like a father figure to me, and that's how I started.
Yeah, you and I share that connection. I know Ron Holtz.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't really know Mr. Kerno that much, but to have that kind of foundation, the ABCs to music composition at such an early age, I'm sure was just a profound influence on you.
yeah,
So that's just incredible that
yeah.
you.
And I would say with Ron Holtz, uh, he was just he was just as much of a musical influence on me, more of as a player, and just as just a musician in general. I mean, he's a brilliant mind. So yeah,
Well, just his love of that style, the brass
right,
band style, is just
mhm,
he's electric.
right,
And it was hard not to get excited about the brass band when playing for him.
right.
I played for years in the Lexington Brass Band with all those professionals,
Mhm.
and it was just a terrific experience that I look upon fondly. Um, let's see, we talked about your influences and how you started out. Thinking about this and that time then, is there any advice you might give to maybe young composers that are thinking like, "Gosh, I'm not sure if this is what I want to do. What can you do to
Yeah.
help?"
So first of all, if you're thinking about composing, just write, write. It can be awful, but just write. I would encourage you to also, if you can, try to get lessons, from a composer. Um, 3, learn to be a really good musician, whether it's understanding music theory on your learn, be proficient on your instrument. Um, Score study um, is a huge thing. Do a lot of listening, and not just pieces, old pieces. Beethoven's great. Bach is great, right? But listen to pieces written in the last 10, 15 years. To be eclectic in that. But also, I was told, this is a true story. Someone asked me at age 11 what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I said a composer. And that was kind of a ridiculous answer, I'll admit. But the person kind of laughed at me, and she, I don't think she was being mean or anything, but she kind of laughed at me like, seriously. But like, and that's what I'm doing. I'm a composer. So if you want to do that, go for it. go for it. And work hard. I mean, and just write and write. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice. It's been a real pleasure to have you join us today. Thank you so much, Dr. Okpehbolo. At this point, I'd like to throw it back to the festival and hope everybody enjoys the rest of this weekend.
Thank you so much.